Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I was gone for a little while. We went on a little family vacay to Disney World. I didn't expect it to be 3 weeks in between videos. I realized after I made the last video, it's actually kind of hard to talk about these things. I think I needed the break. While I'm making videos about my story, there may be like longer breaks in between longer videos just because I need to take care of myself. Some of the things I'm talking about are very triggering. Sometimes it's just okay to take a break and come back to it when you feel ready. Today we are going to be talking about a few transitional years. Honestly, they were kind of blurry and hard to piece together, but so much of what happened in those years played a role in kind of pushing me deeper into the faith. We're going to talk about homeschooling, a little bit about Fundie stuff, moving across states, and also a tornado. I really tried to find a way to make it all more succinct, but there's just so much that happened in that 5-year period. I'm gonna give you like a brief overview of what happened and then how the influences of Christianity like played a part in it. Also, I have a microphone. Look at her. This is gonna be loud. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, guys. Look at how cute she is. I'm so sorry. That was probably really loud. I am so happy about this. I hope you guys can hear me better. Let me know how you feel like it sounds. The next video is when we're going to talk about the Fundie stuff. Get ready for that. We're going to talk about it a little bit in this one. I really want to go more in depth. I want to be very thorough when I'm talking about my experience in Christian fundamentalism. For now, because I'm going to be talking about it a little bit in this video, let me clarify for those of you who don't know exactly what I mean when I use the word Fundie. I'm going to put a definition up here on the screen. Think the Duggar family on TLC, or if you've ever seen Welcome to Plathville, that one is pretty Fundie too. It's a specific way of living and practicing Christianity. Most Fundies believe in things like homesteading and homeschooling and trying to be as detached from the secular world as possible because they believe that in order to raise their children in a way that reflects how God would want them to live, they have to separate themselves from the world. That kind of defines their entire way of life. That's just a little short description of what it means. I'm going to be using the words fundamentalist, fundamentalism, and Fundie interchangeably because no one wants to say those long words over and over again. Keep in mind, I'm going to talk about it at length in the next video. So if you don't know what it is, just wait till then. I honestly thought about not doing this video, but I think it's important for the context of the other videos. So if it feels like it's all over the place, I'm sorry, just bear with me. Okay. This video might be a little bit longer, so feel free to go and grab a snack, get a blanket and get cozy, or do what I do when I watch YouTube videos and get some chores done. Just like last time, I want to give a trigger warning for spiritual abuse and religious trauma. Please take care of yourselves. It's okay to turn the video off. You don't have to finish it if it feels unsafe for you to do that. First, I'm going to give you a little bit of a recap or an overview of what this 5-year period looked like, just so you can have an idea of the timeline, and then I'll talk about how Christianity played a part in it all. My family moved from Orlando, Florida to a very small town in central Alabama when I was 13 years old. We did not initially move into a house. We lived in a camper for 6 months to a year. I don't really remember exactly how long it was. I also don't recommend that. There was like 6 to 7 of us at any given time, and it wasn't fun. One of my siblings and I attended a public school for the first time during middle school, but it was kind of short-lived, and then we went back to homeschooling after that. Eventually, we moved into a house and got a little bit more established. During this time, we were also kind of church hopping, trying to find one that felt more comfortable to us. That took a lot of time, so we were church hopping for a while. It seemed really important to my family that we found a church that left us with the same feeling of community that we felt at the church that we left in Florida, but we never found that. We just kind of kept church hopping and never came across one that kind of had the same feel to it. There were periods of time where we didn't go to a church at all, but during this time we did attend several different variations of the Baptist denomination. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later on. It's kind of silly to me that there are so many variations of one denomination. Like, why can we not just all agree on anything, it seems like? Eventually, once we were more established in our house, we got involved in a Bible study that was held at someone's house locally, and eventually also a church. Both of these were more fundamentalist in nature, and that was kind of our first exposure to that kind of fundamentalism. It also was the only thing that really gave us that sense of community that we were looking for, so that's important. Keep that in mind. I think our drive to find a really tight-knit community is a big part of what pushed us into the arms of fundamentalist Christianity. It can be really nice at times to be a part of that community and to feel like you are a part of something or part of a big family, because the expectation is that everyone kind of believes very similarly. A lot of people typically get along really well until someone disagrees. We'll talk about that later. If you get along really well, you tend to have a more pleasant experience. But there was no room for differences in opinion when it came to theology. All of the gatherings that I attended were always really nice. The people that I knew in these Fundie communities were always very kind to me. I don't have any beef with those people. This is more about the theology and the way that Christianity is practiced within fundamentalist circles and churches. I think that the way that it's practiced can be and is really harmful. I think it's especially important to listen to those who are saying that they've been harmed. There's so much emphasis put on going back to very traditional gender roles. It's this very idealistic picture, and it looks really good from the outside. The problem, in my opinion, with something that is idealistic is that it's really hard for it to be realistic. There are always going to be these gray areas where someone isn't happy, or their experience here wasn't all peachy and happy like they thought that it was going to be. When those people need to talk about their experiences, there should be room left for those experiences to be talked about. If there isn't, then you're basically just believing something that isn't real, because you're pushing aside the experiences of people who don't align with what you would want them to align with. You are brushing people's experiences under the rug if you refuse to acknowledge them, or maybe a better analogy would be stuffing them in the closet. And that is why in these Fundie communities, there's always skeletons in the closet. There's always things that we don't talk about that are a little hush-hush, that aren't appropriate to talk about, or we just kind of pretend like God is going to fix it. Just remember, to anyone who is watching this who is religious, just because your religion feels good to you doesn't mean that it's going to feel good to everyone, and everyone's experiences deserve to be heard and acknowledged. Everyone has the right, and they should have the ability to choose for themselves what or who they decide to worship and what religion they decide to be a part of based on what's best for them. Okay, that was a blurb about fundamentalism. Sorry guys, I got a little passionate for a second, but let's go back. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that experience in public school after being homeschooled for almost my whole life. Transitioning from being in Florida to moving to Alabama was very, very hard, and I had a hard time adjusting. It was a huge culture shock for me. We moved from Orlando, Florida, which had 230,000 people in 2006. I looked it up, to a small town in Alabama, which had, can you guess how many people? 3,000. Not even 3,000. That was an estimate. It was 2,000 and something. I didn't like it. I was miserable. I wanted to go back to Florida. I remember promising myself that I would go back one day when I was able to. I just missed my life there. Remember when I said in the last video that being homeschooled and kind of kept in this Christian bubble didn't really prepare me for what life would look like once I got outside of that? Remember that? I experienced that firsthand when I went to these public schools for the first time. I will say at that time, I think I saw public school as the antithesis to homeschooling. And now that I'm grown, obviously I can see that there are a lot of different ways that you could choose to educate your children. Those are two of them. But in my mind at the time, we didn't go to public school because it was bad. We were homeschooled as an alternative. So that was the only other option that I knew of. Once I had a taste of it, I was like, I think I would like to be homeschooled, even though I didn't really like being homeschooled that much either, but it was better than the public school experience that I had. Long story short, I was in one school for maybe 2 to 3 months and then pulled out and put into another one for the remainder of the semester. And then after that, I went back to being homeschooled. I was heavily bullied in the first school that I was in, and obviously, I had no experience ever being bullied, so I did not understand what was going on. I was bullied for doing things that felt completely normal to me, like befriending a special needs classmate of mine, or being a virgin at 13 years old and not being able to read on quite the same level as everyone else. I immediately felt out of place there, and I was never able to fit in, and that was really hard for me at that age. A little bit of a tangent. I didn't plan on telling the story, but heck, why not? There was one day where I was in my homeroom class, and literally, like, 10 girls cornered me and asked me if I was a virgin, and I was like absolutely stunned because I wasn't exposed to anything about, like, I knew nothing about nothing. I said, yes, I'm a virgin. I'm only 13, because I thought they were legitimately crazy. And this other girl was like, see, there's another person here who's still a virgin, because I guess they were bullying her for being a virgin. Anyway, that was traumatic for me as a 13-year-old. I remember thinking that this was happening because I was being persecuted because I was a Christian. I was pulled out, put into another school for the rest of the semester, and then went back to homeschooling after that. During the time that we were kind of hopping around from these schools, we were also hopping around in churches. We were actually attending for a while a very small Free Will Baptist church. When I say small, I mean it was my family, some extended family of ours, a couple of elderly people who had gone to the church for forever, and then occasionally there would be like visitors or some local people who would come. Like, it was like maybe 25 people total. Like, it was very, very small. When our time at this church was coming to a close, there was a lot of resentment and anger coming from the pastor and his family towards the rest of the people in the congregation. I think there was a lot of expectation that people in the church would change more than they had. I don't really remember what they were supposed to change. I know that, like, a lot of people drink, and keep in mind this was a Baptist church, so maybe that had something to do with it. There was probably more, but I was a kid, so I didn't really know what else was going on. But the pastor and his family almost seemed like they felt that it was their mission to kind of get the congregation of this church to become better Christians or to change. And when that didn't happen at the rate or the pace that they wanted, a lot of resentment and anger started kind of building up, I think. As a result of this, I experienced the closest thing and the only experience I've ever had with this sort of fire and brimstone type preaching. I remember the pastor getting very angry and yelling and stomping every single sermon on stage. And, it would always start out kind of slower, and then it would get faster, and then more yelling and more stomping, and by the time we got to the end of it, he was just yelling, like everything he said was just yelling. I do remember him talking specifically about hell a lot, and how people who sinned were gonna pay for their sins there. I don't think he ever specifically said that about the congregation itself and specific people, but it was kind of implied that that's what he was talking about, because people weren't changing the way that he wanted them to. It was very aggressive. It was very unnecessary, in my opinion, and also just made everyone feel really bad. I think the only reason I really looked forward to going to this church was because it was the only consistent thing happening in my life at the time. It was over a year that we went here, so it was like consistently every single Sunday we went to this church. I think that amount of stability was really attractive to me at the time because of all of the transitioning going on. I also had very few social outlets, and this was the main one. Eventually, the pastor and his family kind of stepped down from their roles of leadership and decided to go back to a church that they had gone to before. The impression that I got was because no one was changing, or the pastor was tired of trying to make people change when they didn't want to, and he was like sort of giving up on the congregation. I know some people are going to watch this who were in that experience with me, and if you had a different perspective, please send me a message and let me know. But that is what I remember happening. I remember there being quite a bit of bad blood between people when the pastor and his family left. Keep in mind what I said earlier about trying to find some kind of community that felt safe and good to us. This was not it. It never felt that way. There were times when it was communal and fun to hang out with everyone, but it never quite felt the way that we really wanted it to. And from what I remember, it kind of felt like the pastor and his family saw the church as a project or a mission that they were on. And I think that's probably pretty likely considering the way that Baptist churches tend to function when it comes to sending missionaries out into certain places, even in local areas. I think that's probably how they were seeing it, and I think that's why they had the reaction that they had when people didn't change. Going back to what I was saying earlier about these different variations of denominations. This church was a Free Will Baptist church, which is a title or denomination that I never really heard before at that point in my life. I was familiar with Baptist or Southern Baptist. That's how I grew up. I had no knowledge of what Reformed Christianity was at the time or its counterpart, which in my experience has many different names. Free Will Baptist is one of them. Others might call it Arminianism or non-Reformed theology. If you are not a Christian or you have never dived deep into the world of Christian theology, you probably have no idea what I'm talking about. I'm going to explain it a little bit more in the next video because it comes up again. If I had to describe it in a very summed up way, which probably is not going to do justice to either side, so please don't come at me in the comments. I will be more thorough in the next video, okay? The differentiation that our church is a Free Will Baptist church is kind of commenting on this move that some Christians made to go into a more Reformed Christian theology. Say we have Reformed theology on one side and free will on the other side. Some Christians believe that Jesus has predestined or chosen certain people to go to heaven, and there's nothing that you can do to change that. Some people believe that God hasn't predestined or chosen anyone, but that anyone who decides to accept Jesus can go to heaven. There's a lot of conversation and debate about this and the understanding of it. I didn't know anything about it at the time. I learned a lot more about it now. I was never a Reformed Christian, if any of you are curious. I don't know if any of you were or are, but I dabbled. I did dabble for a short period of time. It just never felt right to me because it felt so exclusive. Like I said, that'll come up again in the next video and we're going to talk about it. Just keep in mind that this church believed that anyone could come into the faith as long as they accepted Jesus. Hi guys, I'm back. We took a little break. I had a little eyelash malfunction, but we're back. We're good now. Also, I wasn't vibing with my lip color, so I changed it. Let me know what you guys think. I have 3 colors that I go back and forth between, and I'm kind of wanting more now that I'm filming videos. Maybe I'll get some more. Who knows? So let me pause here for a second before I talk about high school. Like I said before, this time of transitioning for me was very hard. I needed a lot of consistency and stability, and I really wasn't getting those things in many areas of my life. Looking back, I really needed something to stay consistent, and the fact that it didn't really worsened the anxiety that I had already had at the time. The fact that my social life was so rocky as well, and we did a lot of church hopping, didn't really help the fact either. I remember feeling the need for something that would ground me or to just feel like I fit in somewhere. What I got instead was a lot of scripture about how Christians will struggle in this world and will be judged for following Jesus. It was my duty to kind of use these opportunities as a mission field and to tell those who persecuted me about my faith. This only served to further alienate me from my peers, and more than that, it pushed me deeper into the faith that I had. The only resources I really had were based in Christianity and based in this idea of let God or let Jesus be your rock and the place you go to for comfort. I only had scripture or sermons or religious leaders basically pointing me back to Jesus, which effectively just made me feel more alone. But I sank deeper into it because it was all I had. We continued to church hop after that, mostly staying within the Baptist denomination, although there were some variations of other kinds of Baptist churches that we went to. Eventually, when we moved into a house, I was going into high school, and since we were going from being public schooled in middle school, I guess my mom had to find some kind of like cover school for us, and she ended up finding one that was about 45 minutes away from where we lived. I remember this school. It was based out of a Pentecostal church, felt a lot more open and free than what I had previously experienced within Christianity. I believe that they were non-denominational. That was definitely the vibe that I got. They had what we called co-op classes, and basically any one of the homeschooling parents would choose to come and teach a class on a specific subject. For example, one year I took chemistry. Someone volunteered to teach that class. I don't know what their qualifications were. I don't think that they have to have specific qualifications. I think it's just kind of whoever feels like they are qualified enough to teach the class can teach it, because according to this state, it really only matters if you get through the curriculum or the textbooks. So it doesn't really matter who's teaching it. I could be wrong. If any of you know anything about that side of homeschooling, let me know. I do know that you have to turn grades in and things like that to a cover school in order for the state to recognize you as truly having an education. But I don't know about the logistics. So if any of you know anything about that, let me know. I would love to be enlightened. It did feel like the people who were teaching the classes were very unqualified. That's a little loophole with homeschooling that I do not quite understand. But I was happy at this school for the most part because it was the most positive and what felt freeing social interactions that I had since leaving Florida. And at this point, I really just wanted a place where I felt like I belonged. And I found that here in a lot of ways. However, being homeschooled in high school was really hard for me. I think being homeschooled can be really good and beneficial for a lot of people. I obviously had a hard time in public school system, and I know a lot of people who also had a hard time in the public school system. And I think that obviously needs to be reformed. But do I think homeschooling is always the answer? Not necessarily. I think that for me, the issue came in when you really try to mix this homeschooling lifestyle with a much more fundamentalist version of religion, or in this case Christianity, that really seeks to separate you from anyone who thinks differently from you. If you combine those two things together, it can be really harmful. One thing that people don't mention about homeschooling is that it can be really lonely. If you don't take the proper steps to stay involved in activities and classes and really put a lot of intentionality behind socializing, then it can become something that feels very isolating. We were being gradually more and more exposed to these more fundamentalist Christian ideas. And one of the pillars of fundamentalist Christianity is this huge surge to separate yourself from the world, effectively meaning anyone who doesn't have the same belief system as you. I remember long stretches where we just had nowhere to go, and I was so bored and so lonely. As a young person who needed to develop social skills and be surrounded by friends and opportunities, that was really hard. I also believe that I needed to be surrounded by people who were different from me so that I could learn how to develop my own thoughts and feelings and opinions about everything. I think staying isolated and sheltered from anything that was different kind of stunted that growth. Keep in mind that we were also living pretty far outside the nearest town. We really didn't go many places unless it was for church or for school. The high school I attended, however, did have a lot of diversity within the Christian faith there. And I think that was probably really good for me to experience, although it was a little piece of my life. I would go 1 or 2 days a week to this school. I think it was really good to be around people who thought differently from me, and it helped to kind of expand the way that I thought about Christianity. Even though socializing was very challenging for me, I kept pushing to go. I wanted to be there as much as I could. I actually made friends there, and I found Christianity to feel safer in that space than it had in other spaces that I had been a part of. It made me feel like I could take Christianity on as something that I wanted for myself instead of something that I was just obligated to do. I got into literally as many extracurricular activities as I could at this school. I was in a ballroom dance class, praise team, as many book clubs as I could be a part of. Any like extracurricular classes that I could take, I was trying to take them. I also got really into CCM at this school. For those of you who don't know what CCM is, it just means contemporary Christian music. This was like a game changer for me in my faith. Like, I felt like I could relate to this music way more than I could relate to like the hymns and stuff that I used to listen to or that I would listen to at these like very traditional Baptist churches that I had been going to. I loved Need to Breathe so much. If any of you guys were Need to Breathe fans, please let me know, because I still love a good folk song. Like, I genuinely do. Like, later on in my life, I would start to really like bands like The Head and the Heart and the Lumineers, and like Noah Kahan now is like one of my favorite artists. It's so funny because like I just liked it, and like that was a genre that I liked. I think this is also when my interests started to like clash with my family's a bit more. They were really holding on to these fundamentalist Christian beliefs. I will say not everyone in my family. Some of us were like expanding at the same time, but there were some who were holding on to these really fundamentalist Christian beliefs, many of which had issues with certain types of music. In my life at home, these like Fundie beliefs were much more prevalent. Anything we read, watched, listened to was highly moderated. So going to classes and kind of being left on my own for a few hours on that day when I was there gave me the chance to kind of develop this individuality away from that, because I found something that I actually really enjoyed that was still under the realm of Christianity. Having friends and support from others who also practiced religion in a more liberal way was, I think, really beneficial for me, because it kind of helped me really feel comfortable expanding because there was a support group there. I think it was probably one of the first times in my life where I ever really felt like I had some autonomy from the beliefs that my family held, and it was a good time. I enjoyed it. Like I did. I liked that school. Not going to say that there wasn't anything problematic going on at the school, but for the most part, my experience was positive. Okay, we are getting to the end of this video. There's just a couple more things I want to say before we transition into the Fundie video. Towards the end of high school, something very unexpected happened to my family. I graduated high school in May of 2011. On April 27th, 2011, an EF4 tornado ripped through my town, destroying many homes, including the one that we were in at the time, and also took several lives. Some of the people who lost their lives were in these religious circles that we had been a part of. The event was horrific and traumatic, and to this day I can't go through tornado season here in Alabama without having a handful of panic attacks on those really stormy nights. I would like to clarify that our house did not get destroyed by the storm. The picture that you saw was not our house. It was the house that we were sheltering in during the storm, though. So the house collapsed on top of us. However, we weren't buried under rubble exactly. The room that we were in was still standing. While the house was rubble, we were still able to collect ourselves and get out of that pile of debris after the tornado passed. This is hard for me to talk about. Maybe more so than anything else so far, which is kind of crazy. Like, my hands are shaking. Obviously, I've talked about this a lot in therapy. It was a very scary experience. All of my family members made it out unscathed, thank goodness. But the months that followed this natural disaster were very hard on the community that we were in. There were so many trees and power lines down that it took weeks just to get the power back on and to get the roads cleared enough so that people could get in and out of that area. We lived for a few weeks on food donated by volunteers and FEMA, I think. And we flushed our toilets with pool water because we didn't have any power. It was hard to recover. We definitely spent the rest of the summer and into the next year trying to recover from everything that happened during the storm. I think emotionally, none of us knew how to process anything at the time, and that was really hard. We kind of just tried to get back to normal as quickly as we could. As you can imagine, this put a bit of a damper on me graduating high school that year. I didn't get to celebrate it as much as I would have liked to. Also, any opportunities to attend colleges were kind of off the table because all of our finances and energy really was wrapped up in trying to repair and recover after that. On top of that, the house that we attended the Bible study in was no longer there. That made, I think, my whole family feel a little bit displaced, and we kind of started going on that search again for another community that felt similar. Even though we still had our home and the repairs for us were minimal, everything for us changed after that. A lot of times when things like this happen, you hear people say, God must have been looking out for us, or God must have protected us, or was there keeping us safe. I understand why they say that, because it feels like it took a miracle in order for you to survive something like this. I don't love that, because there were people who did not make it through that storm, and that, I think, would indicate that God wasn't looking after them, and that's a bit of a problem. At the same time, it did feel that way, like there was something that had to have intervened in order to keep you safe from this horrible, angry storm that was literally over you for like a full 30 seconds, and you still survived. Like, it increased that feeling that there must have been something supernatural going on here. And I think that really is what pushed us deeper into the faith, almost like rejuvenating that drive to find a community that felt the way that we wanted it to. Since high school was over for me and we were spending so much time recovering, we became much more isolated again. And especially because we weren't going to that Bible study anymore, I don't even think we were going to church for a little while after that. The freedom that I had enjoyed and the individuality that I had enjoyed at my high school was over, and we started eventually attending a new church. This church, along with other influences from fundamentalist groups that we were a part of at the time, led to our faith becoming much more strict and closed off from the world in the way that we practiced it. The years that followed this for me were probably the hardest, and that's why the next video is going to be a doozy, because it's a lot to explain. It seemed that the more freedom and the more individuality I needed, the more that religion or that faith wanted to take that freedom away from me. Not just because of the beliefs, even more so specifically because I'm a woman. These Fundie Christian beliefs are heavily based in very specific gender roles, and that can be very debilitating if you are a woman in that world. The further in we got to fundamentalism, the more it felt strict and the more it felt all-encompassing. The deeper in we got, the further we got from anyone who disagreed with us or was different from us. That became really scary. I turned around at some point and I realized that we were this deep in, and I was like, what are we doing? But we're going to talk about all that in the next video. I've had enough of talking about traumatizing things for today, so let's end this one. Truthfully, talking about these experiences is difficult, but I do hope it sheds some light on what the more Christian fundamentalist sects of Christianity look like, and how they can really strip you of your individuality and ability to kind of critically think about what you believe or who you want to be. The next video might take a little bit of time to get out because I want to be really thorough. Like I said at the beginning, I'm going to go really in depth talking about fundamentalism. And, you know, obviously it's about my experience with it, but I want to be very clear about the things that I had issues with, because it's really important to me to make sure that I'm separating the practices of this religion from the people, because most of the people in my experience were kind and they did not understand how their religious beliefs were harming people. If this video is triggering for you, please take time to take care of yourself. We do not have to listen or watch anything that feels triggering. Obviously, if you do it on your own time and when you feel comfortable enough to do so. If you don't Turn it off, babe. That being said, I would love to hear your thoughts on this in the comments. I'm getting to the parts that I really want to talk about. I would love to know what you guys have to say. Some of you I know are going to know about parts of this story. So tell me what your thoughts are. Even if they're different from mine, I would love to hear them. Did you have any experiences that pushed you deeper into your faith? And was that a good thing? Was that beneficial for you? Or did it ultimately turn out to be harmful? Please remember to be kind in the comments and do not try to force your beliefs on others. We're not going to tolerate that here. We want to leave room for everyone's experiences. Also, just a reminder that if you want to send me your stories to talk about on my channel, there are instructions in the description on how to do that. You can always let me know in your email if you would like to be kept anonymous. When I get done with the videos about my story, I plan to start diving into those stories and talking to you guys about them so that we can just share and realize that a lot of people have these experiences and we're not alone. I have a lot of scary experiences and hard experiences within Christianity, and I know you guys do too. So feel free to share if it feels comfortable and safe to you, and I would love to chat about them. Okay, I think we made it to the end of this video. Wow, that felt like a lot. I don't know if it felt like a lot to you guys. I don't even know how long this video is going to be. Hopefully it's like not super long. Tell me what you think. Tell me if you like my lip color. I like it. I think I like it better. Also, can you hear me okay? This is the first time I've used a microphone, so I'm sorry if I'm breathing into it a lot, but we're just gonna have to deal with it for now. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you guys literally so much. Have a good rest of your day or night or evening whenever you're watching this. Take care of yourself. Watch your favorite show. Give your partner a hug. Something to help you have a good day. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next video.